Story 1, The Harvest Curse. This was supposed to be our dream. The culmination of everything Maria and I had worked toward 2 hectares of Nevada. Farmland purchased at a price so low, the realtor kept apologizing. Kept insisting there must be some mistake. But the papers were legitimate, and the land was ours. Maria was 3 months pregnant, and we'd both grown tired of the city. Tired of concrete and noise and neighbors whose names we'd never learned. So when we saw the listing for a cottage with an existing cornfield, we signed without hesitation. Without asking the questions we should have asked. Like, why was it so cheap? Like, who owned it before us? Like, what happened to them? The drive out was beautiful. Rolling hills giving way to flat expanses of land that stretched toward horizons, unmarred by buildings or power lines. And when we finally arrived, the cottage stood exactly as pictured, small and weathered but sturdy, with the cornfield rising behind it like a golden wall. Maria walked toward the house with Rex, our dog, while I unloaded the trunk. And I was struggling with a particularly heavy box when I heard Rex start barking with that frantic intensity. Maria's scream cut through the afternoon air, and I dropped everything. My heart lurching as I ran toward the sound, rounding the corner to find her standing rigid with her hand pressed to her chest, breathing hard while Rex sat calmly at her feet as if nothing had happened. "What is it?" I asked, rushing to her side, and she pointed with a shaking finger toward the cornfield. I was just frightened by the scarecrow. I looked up and understood immediately why she'd screamed, because these weren't the friendly autumn decorations. You see, in family photos, these were nightmares given form. Dozens of them scattered throughout the field, each one more disturbing than the last. Their faces were burlap stretched to tight over frames that suggested skulls underneath. Their mouths stitched in expressions that looked less like smiles and more like screams frozen mid-sound. Their arms positioned in ways that seemed to reach rather than simply hang. Some wore clothes so rotted they were more whole than fabric. Others were naked wooden frames that made them look like skeletons. And in the fading afternoon light, they cast shadows that moved wrong, that seemed to gesture independently of the wind. "We should take them down," Maria said, but I shook my head because the sun was already setting, and the idea of walking through that cornfield in twilight made my skin crawl in ways I couldn't explain. "Tomorrow," I told her, "we'll deal with them tomorrow." And we went inside to unpack and pretend we weren't both deeply unsettled by what waited in our field. That evening, as we were settling in, 2 heavy knocks echoed from the front door, and Maria and I exchanged glances because we weren't expecting anyone. Didn't know anyone within 50 miles who might visit. I opened the door to find an old man standing on our porch, his clothes tattered and stained, and around his neck hung an inverted cross that caught the porch light and seemed to absorb it rather than reflect it. He stared at me with eyes that held no warmth, no friendliness, just a blank intensity that made me want to close the door. "Can I help you?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady, and he replied in a voice like gravel, "You cannot help me, but I can help you." Before I could react, he grabbed my wrist with surprising strength for someone his age, pulled the cross from his neck and pressed it into my palm with fingers that felt like old leather dot. "Hey, get your hands off me," I shouted, jerking my arm away from his iron grip. But he didn't flinch, didn't apologize, just stared at me with those dead eyes and said, "There's no time to waste, son. The harvest is almost upon us. Hang the cross on your doorpost or dire consequences shall follow." The way he said harvest made it sound like a proper noun, like a name for something specific and terrible. And before I could ask what he meant, he turned and walked into the darkness beyond our porch light. Disappearing so quickly, it was as if the night itself had swallowed him whole. I stood there, holding the cross, feeling its weight in my hand. And Maria called from inside, asking who it was, and I told her, nobody's sweetheart. Just some prankster, because what else could I say? That some doomsday prophet had just threatened us with something called the harvest. I looked at the cross one more time, at its inverted design that seemed deliberately blasphemous, and tossed it into the fireplace where the flames consumed it eagerly, turning it to ash within seconds. That night I slept poorly, my dreams filled with images of scarecrows moving through cornrows, their stitched mouths opening to release sounds like wind through dead trees.
What was that?
And when I woke at midnight, I heard something that made me question whether I was still dreaming, a bell, clanging with slow, deliberate rhythm somewhere in the house. I went downstairs in my pajamas, following the sound to the living room, where I discovered something impossible. A grandfather clock stood against the wall, massive and ornate, and I knew with absolute certainty that it hadn't been there when we'd gone to bed. The clock's pendulum swung with hypnotic regularity, and behind it I could see the outline of a door that had been chained shut from the outside as if to keep something in or keep someone out. But what drew my attention away from the clock was the window, and what I saw through it made my blood turn cold. The scarecrows were gone, every single one of them. The wooden posts standing empty in the moonlit field like grave markers without graves. I rubbed my eyes, thinking exhaustion was playing tricks, that the wine at dinner had been stronger than I'd realized. But when I looked again, the field remained empty, and I went back to bed telling myself there was a rational explanation, that neighbors were playing pranks, that I'd understand in the morning. Except morning brought the scarecrows back. Every one of them returned to their posts as if they'd never left. And when I mentioned it to Maria, she laughed and said I must have been seeing things, that scarecrows don't wander. But they did wander, I discovered over the next 3 nights, always disappearing after midnight and returning before dawn. And each night I stood at that window, watching the empty field and wondering where they went, what they did in those dark hours when they left their posts. On the 4th morning, I awoke to find Rex missing, his bed empty, his food untouched. And I searched the house, calling his name with increasing panic, because Rex never wandered, never left Maria's side, especially with her being pregnant. I found him in the cornfield, or what remained of him, his body lying at the foot of one of the scarecrows in a pool of blood that had already started to attract flies. Someone had butchered him with methodical precision, had used what looked like a cleaver to inflict wounds that seemed almost ritualistic in their placement, and the cleaver itself lay beside his body, its blade crusted with dried blood. I stood there staring at my dead dog and trying to understand who would do this, why anyone would do this, when I heard footsteps behind me and turned to find the old man standing there as if he'd materialized from the corn itself. "Did you hang the cross like I told you?" he asked without preamble, without sympathy for the dead animal at my feet, and I shook my head, anger rising in my throat. Because how dare he show up here now? How dare he act like this was somehow my fault? "No," I said, my voice tight. I burnt it. And I watched his face contort into something between pity and disgust as he hissed through his teeth like I'd just confessed to the most foolish act imaginable. "Such was the fate of your predecessors," he said, gesturing vaguely at the ground as if bodies were buried beneath our feet. "Prepare your household. The harvest will begin after the 11th hour." "Wait," I started to say. "Do you know what happened to my dog?" But when I looked up from Rex's body, the old man had vanished again, simply gone as if he'd never been there at all. and I was left alone with questions that multiplied faster than I could process them. I carried Rex back to the house and tried to figure out how to tell Maria that our dog had been murdered, that something was deeply wrong with this place, that maybe we should leave before whatever happened to our predecessors happened to us. That night I couldn't sleep, kept checking the clock as it crawled toward midnight, toward the 11th hour the old man had mentioned. And when the grandfather clock began to chime, I was already awake, already watching. The sound that accompanied the chimes wasn't wind or settling, it was movement. Dozens of bodies moving through cornstalks, and when I looked out the window, my worst fears crystallized into terrible reality. The scarecrows were alive, genuinely animate, moving with jerky, purposeful motions toward the house, and each one carried farming tools, scythes and axes, and rusted implements that might have been used for planting once, but now looked like weapons. Their burlap faces remained fixed in those horrible stitched expressions, but their bodies moved with intent, with hunger, with purpose that went beyond anything natural or explainable. I grabbed Maria from bed, her pregnant belly making her slow, making her vulnerable, and we stumbled down the stairs as the first axe blade crashed through our front door, splintering wood and sending splinters flying. They were everywhere, surrounding the house, their tools battering against windows and walls. And Maria was screaming, asking me, "What's happening? What are those things?" Asterisk and I had no answers, because how do you explain that the decorative scarecrows have come to kill you? The front door was impossible, the back door was blocked, and our only option was the strange door behind the grandfather clock. The one that had been chained shut but now stood mysteriously open, as if inviting us, as if this had all been planned. We ran through it, and the door slammed shut behind us with a finality that sounded like a coffin lid. And inside we found ourselves in a room that shouldn't exist. A space filled with objects that made my skin crawl, ancient scrolls covered in languages I didn't recognize. Fetish ornaments made from bones and feathers. Books bound in leather that looked disturbingly like human skin. Maria found a scroll that was newer than the others, written in English, and as she read aloud, I felt our situation shift from terrible to hopeless. The harvest comes every generation, claims those who refuse protection, and the only salvation is the inverted cross placed upon the doorpost before the 11th hour of the 11th night. We had been warned, had been given the exact instructions needed to survive, and I had thrown that cross into the fire out of pride, out of stubborn refusal to believe in things that seemed like superstition. The scroll described what happened to previous owners, how their bones now fertilized the cornfield, how their screams had been absorbed into the land itself. And as Maria read with trembling hands, I could hear the scarecrows outside battering against the walls with renewed violence. And I knew that we would join those bones, would become part of the harvest, would feed the curse we'd been too foolish to prevent. Story 2. The Mannequin Farm. The chemical smell never left my clothes, no matter how many times I washed them. And on that particular morning in Louisiana, driving toward the outskirts with my pest control kit rattling in the trunk, I remember thinking this would be just another routine infestation call. Another paycheck, another day of breathing in poison until my lungs burned. The wooden sign appeared through the morning mist like a tombstone. The Mannequin Farm, carved in letters that seemed to bleed into the grain, and I should have turned around right then. Should have trusted the way my stomach knotted when I read those words. But the money was good, and bills don't pay themselves. I rang the doorbell and waited, listening to the silence that pressed against the door like something living, something that didn't want to let me in. Minutes crawled by before I knocked harder.
I know you're in there.
And that's when I heard it, a voice so feeble it might have been wind through a crack, except it formed words, "Coming, dear." The door opened to reveal an old woman. At least I thought she was a woman then, with a smile that stretched too wide across her face, revealing teeth the color of old piano keys, broken and uneven. "Come in, dear," she said, and the smell hit me immediately, bleach and detergent so strong it made my eyes water. A chemical assault that seemed wrong for a place supposedly infested with cockroaches. She led me inside while explaining how she'd tried to kill those vermin herself, but it doesn't work. Seems like they need a way more painful death to die. And the way she said painful made something cold slither down my spine. Behind a door on my right came a scratching sound, frantic and desperate. And when I glanced at it, she said, "That's just my cat. Poor baby must be hungry." But the scratching didn't sound like any cat I'd ever heard. It sounded like fingernails on wood, like someone trying to claw their way out. The house was impossibly clean, not a speck of dust, not a crumb on the floor. And in all my years doing pest control, I'd never seen an infestation in a place this sterile. She stood behind me in the kitchen, watching as I unpacked my equipment. And every time I turned around, she was there with that grin, those yellow teeth catching the light. Her eyes following my every movement like she was memorizing me, studying me, planning something. I tried making conversation to break the suffocating silence, asking if she lived alone, and she said yes. I never married, and I don't think anyone can live with me. And when I asked why, she leaned closer and whispered, "I'm an artist. It's hard to understand an artist." The way she said artist made it sound like a confession, like a warning. And I wanted to leave, but I'd barely started the job, and my pride wouldn't let me walk away from easy money. Just because some old woman was creepy. I asked to use the bathroom, needing a moment away from her constant staring. And she directed me down the hall on your right, her voice following me like an echo.
Come on.
The bathroom light switch clicked uselessly under my fingers. The bulb apparently dead, but morning sunlight struggled through a grimy window, casting everything in a sickly yellow glow that made the white tiles look like old bone. I did my business quickly, eager to finish this job and get out. And when I pressed the garbage can pedal to throw away the paper towel, the lid opened to reveal something that made my throat close. A skinless animal head.
What is that?
Fur and identity stripped away to reveal raw muscle and exposed teeth. Maggots writhing through the eye sockets in a feeding frenzy that made wet sounds in the silence.
Oh God!
I left the bathroom immediately, my hands shaking as I walked straight toward the front door, forgetting my equipment, forgetting everything except the need to get out. To get away from this place and that thing in the garbage and that woman with her artist smile. My keys were in my pocket. I could feel them there. Could already imagine myself driving away from the Mannequin farm and never looking back. But when I reached the main door and twisted the knob, it wouldn't turn locked from the inside.
Locked.
Probably needing a key I didn't have. The woman had disappeared. The kitchen empty when I glanced back. And that scratching sound started again from behind the locked door.
Let me out!
Louder now, more frantic, accompanied by a muffled voice that might have been screaming or might have been crying. I couldn't tell through the wood. You might think I'm paranoid, might think I overreacted. But standing there with a skinless head fresh in my memory and that desperate scratching filling my ears, I knew something was fundamentally wrong with this place.
Keep looking.
With this job, with that woman who called herself an artist. I crouched down to look through the keyhole of the locked room, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my temples. And at first, I saw nothing but darkness, just a black void that seemed to swallow the light. Then an eye appeared, bloodshot and wide with terror, staring directly into mine. And a voice broke through the door in words I couldn't understand, followed by violent banging that shook the frame. "Who is it?"
What?
I started to say. "Hello." But I never finished because something struck the back of my head with enough force to turn the world into a brief flash of white pain before everything went black. Have you ever wondered what happens in the moment before you lose consciousness? That fraction of a second when your brain knows it's shutting down but hasn't quite finished the process. I remember the floor rushing up to meet my face. Remember the taste of blood in my mouth. Remember thinking, this is how I die. Killed by a job that paid $200. The first person to answer correctly will receive a small reward from me, the storyteller. Tanita as a way of saying thank you for watching and supporting. Now I want to know, where are you watching this from? Comment your local time and location below. Let me know you're out there in the darkness with me. Because sometimes knowing you're not alone is the only comfort we have. The smell of chemicals was stronger when I opened my eyes, mixed with something else now. Something organic and rotting that made bile rise in my throat. When consciousness returned, it came in fragments, white ceiling, harsh lights, drops of blood on my shirt, forming a pattern like some obscene Rorschach test. And across from me sat a man, or what remained of one, skeletal and exhausted, tied to a chair that looked less like furniture and more like an instrument of torture. His eyes met mine, and I saw in them the kind of despair that comes from knowing exactly how your story ends. From having given up hope so long ago that hope itself became just another word without meaning. The chair he sat in was attached to some kind of platform, wired with electrical components I didn't understand but instinctively feared. And the smell that permeated the room was decay masked by industrial cleaner. Death scrubbed, but never quite erased.
But it is.
The door opened and the old woman entered, except she wasn't a woman anymore. The wig hung from one hand like a scalp. The makeup was smeared and diluted as if he had tried to wash it off, but hadn't quite succeeded, revealing the masculine features underneath the performance. "Sorry for the dramatic entrance," he said, in a voice deeper now, without the feminine affectation. "You see, I have to work hard to collect my raw material." "Raw material," I repeated, the words strange in my mouth. And he smiled that same terrible smile and said, "I kill and then eat people." But then corrected himself. "I'm not a barbarian. As I said, I'm an artist." He walked behind me and I felt my chair turn, rotating to face the other side of the room. And what I saw there made my mind rebel against reality, because surely this couldn't be real. Surely I was still unconscious, and this was just a nightmare born from chemicals and head trauma. Mannequins stood in careful arrangement. Dozens of them, each one wearing skin like a suit. Animal hides stretched over wooden frames with such precision that for a moment they looked almost alive. Wolves and deer and things I couldn't identify. Their glass eyes replaced with real ones that stared with the fixed gaze of the dead. "Those are my early works," he explained with the pride of someone showing off a gallery exhibition. "And these three, gesturing to the corner where human figures stood, are my latest creations." The human mannequins were worse than the animals because I could see in their distorted features the people they used to be. Could imagine them arriving here for some innocent reason like pest control or delivery. Could see myself joining them soon. He'd used their real eyes but hadn't fitted them properly, so they hung partially out of the sockets, dangling against cheeks that had been someone's face, someone's identity, someone's life before this artist decided they would make good material. The man in the electric chair was crying now. silent tears running down his hollow cheeks. And the artist walked over to him almost tenderly, almost lovingly, and pressed a button that made the chair vibrate with violent current. The sound was terrible mechanical humming mixed with the wet crack of a body being shaken apart from the inside. And after 3 minutes, he released the button and the man slumped forward, dead. I like skinning them without wounds,
You see,
the
it's
artist
not about the
explained
pain,
as if discussing
it's about
technique.
the connection.
It's quite a merciful method,
I
you
don't
know.
understand.
And he removed a dog leash from the corpse's neck and walked toward me with it, ready to begin my transformation from person to material. My brain raced because I used the only tool I had left, told him I wanted my wife's sandwich. One last time before the starvation process began. Fair enough, he said. I'll bring your bag to you. And while he walked away, I felt my heart hammering. He returned with my pest control bag, explaining he'd checked for weapons.
What are you gonna do?
And as his face leaned close, I grabbed the most corrosive chemical bottle and threw the contents directly into his eyes. The scream wasn't human as the chemical began dissolving his face, melting skin like wax, and I ran upstairs, found the balcony and jumped. The impact hurt, but nothing broke,
God!
and I limped to my car, got the engine started,
Hello
and
there.
looked up to see him on the porch with half his face melted away to bone, watching me with his remaining eye as he raised one hand and waved, slow and deliberate, like we'd meet again. Story 3. The Farmhouse Time Loop. I was sleeping peacefully in the passenger seat while Clark drove. The gentle motion of the car and the warm afternoon breeze lulling me into dreams about the lakeside farmhouse we were heading to. Our first real vacation in months after endless weeks of overtime and stress and barely seeing each other despite living in the same apartment. The brakes screamed and I jolted forward, my head smashing into the dashboard hard enough to make stars explode across my vision. And when I opened my eyes, Clark was sitting rigid behind the wheel
What was
with his
that?
eyes squeezed shut like a child afraid of monsters. "Clark, what the hell?" I shouted, rubbing the growing bump on my forehead. "What happened?" But he didn't answer. Just sat there with his face drained of color until finally he opened his eyes and looked even more terrified than before. He got out of the car without explanation and started searching the road, looking under the car, checking the ditches on either side. And I followed him out, demanding to know what was going on, my patience wearing thin because my head hurt and he was acting insane. "Where did he go?" Clark muttered. "He was right here. I almost hit him." And I looked around at the empty road stretching in both directions without a single person in sight. "You're talking about what?" I asked. "There's no one here." But Clark insisted someone had run into the road, that he'd seen a man appear out of nowhere, forcing him to brake. Except now that man had vanished as completely as if he'd never existed. I decided Clark had dozed off while driving and experienced one of those hypnic jerks that feel real but aren't. So I took over the wheel and told him to rest, turning up the radio to keep us both alert. We were both starting to relax when we reached the farmhouse gate and saw something that made us both freeze. An old man stood waiting with a rifle cradled in his arms, his face expressionless as stone, watching our approach with eyes that seemed to catalogue everything about us. I rolled down the window nervously and asked what the rifle was for, my voice higher than I intended, and he replied in a monotone, "For the wolves, Mr. Parker." He added, "Welcome to the farmhouse where time stands still." And though I didn't understand what he meant by that phrase, it sent a chill down my spine that had nothing to do with the temperature. The farmhouse itself was beautiful, exactly like the photos online. A rustic cottage surrounded by gardens and overlooking a pristine lake that reflected the sky like polished glass. and I felt my earlier anxiety melting away as I rushed to hug Clark, to celebrate that we'd finally made it. But Mr. Parker walked between us, carrying our luggage. His timing so perfect, it seemed deliberate, and the moment was broken before it could fully form. That evening, I was pulled from sleep by a gunshot, loud and sharp enough to make my heart race, and I stumbled to the balcony thinking Mr. Parker must have killed one of those wolves he'd mentioned. What I saw instead made no sense. A girl in a white dress that flowed like wedding silk stood on the upper terrace holding the rifle, smoke still curling from its barrel, and she was so still she might have been a statue, except statues don't shoot guns. I called out to her, my voice echoing across the quiet night. But she didn't acknowledge me, didn't turn or wave or give any sign she'd heard. Just walked away into the darkness, leaving me standing there, confused and slightly offended. I decided to find out who she was, this mysterious shooting bride who ignored friendly greetings. And I left our room heading for the stairs when a hand touched my shoulder, making me jump. Mr. Parker stood behind me with that same blank expression. Tea is served at the table by the lake. Please come, madame.
You startled me.
I asked about the girl on the terrace, and his face somehow became even more rigid.
Why are you holding that rifle,
That
Mr.
is a
Parker?
private area, madame. Guests are not allowed there. Please leave. And something in his tone made it clear this wasn't a request, but a command. I gave up on the terrace girl and went to have tea by the lake, where I told Clark what I'd seen. And he was about to respond when we both witnessed something equally bizarre.
Are you sure you're not
Another
just
girl
tired,
emerged from the lake, walking toward the house. Her clothes completely dry despite having just come from the water, moving with the mechanical precision of someone sleepwalking. We called out to her, but like the terrace girl, she ignored us completely, didn't even glance in our direction, just kept walking until she disappeared around the corner of the house. When I asked Mr. Parker about the girls, he said, "Guest information is confidential," with a finality that ended the conversation.
Time for hunting.
Then told us to get ready for hunting, as if mysterious girls appearing and disappearing was perfectly normal. The hunting turned out to be a simulated game in the woods. Mr. Parker pointing directions, while Clark and I took turns shooting at sounds that came from hidden Bluetooth speakers. And we laughed about it afterward, the tension from earlier dissolving into the pleasant tiredness of a day well spent. Dinner was delicious, some kind of curry that made my mouth water. And when I jokingly asked for the recipe, Mr. Parker stared at me with those dead eyes and said, "It's human meat curry." And the silence that followed was broken only when he burst into horrible laughter and promised to give me the recipe when we left. The food must have been drugged, because despite it being early, we both fell asleep almost immediately. A heavy, dreamless sleep that felt more like unconsciousness than rest. The gunshot woke me again, same time. Same girl on the terrace in her white dress, same rifle smoking in her hands. And when I came downstairs, Mr. Parker was waiting to stop me from going upstairs, to tell me tea was served by the lake. At the lake, the same girl emerged from the water completely dry. At hunting, Clark missed and I shot, and Mr. Parker showed us the speaker. At dinner, he made the same human meat joke with the same monstrous laugh. The next night, the exact same sequence, repeated. Terrace girl, tea, lake girl, hunting, dinner. Sleep, and I tried to tell Clark we were living the same day over and over, but he looked at me like I was crazy. Told me I just needed rest. By the fourth repetition, I was losing my mind. The sameness of each day pressing down on me like a physical weight. And I woke up early, determined to break the cycle. To confront the terrace girl before Mr. Parker could stop me. I reached her room and saw her emerging, and when I approached, she raised the rifle and pointed it directly at my chest. her finger tightening on the trigger, and I ran back to our room with my heart trying to escape my ribcage. I shook Clark awake and told him everything, the repeating days, the identical sequences. The girl who tried to shoot me, and for the first time, he believed me. Fear finally breaking through his rational skepticism. We packed nothing, just ran to the car and started driving. But Mr. Parker was at the gate with his rifle raised, and I had to choose between stopping and potentially dying, or driving through and definitely trying to kill us. I hit the accelerator and we crashed past him as bullets shattered the back window, glass raining down on the seats as we sped toward the highway. We were almost free when we saw him, the man Clark had nearly hit on our way here, standing in the road waving his arms frantically. And this time I stopped because nothing made sense anymore, and maybe he had answers.
He needs help.
He showed us his ID, explained he'd been a guest who got trapped in the time loop,
This is mine.
that the farmhouse was cursed and everyone who stayed there was doomed to repeat the same day forever. Unable to leave, unable to change anything. We'd escaped only because we'd broken the pattern, had done something different enough to shatter the cycle. And as he climbed into our back seat, I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the farmhouse in the distance, peaceful and beautiful, waiting for the next guests who wouldn't believe the warnings, who would think time standing still was just a charming phrase instead of a literal threat. Sleep carefully tonight, because sometimes the places we choose for rest are the places we rest forever. And if you find yourself living yesterday again tomorrow, remember that some loops can only be broken by those brave enough to run.